On April 2, 2025, President Trump declared an economic emergency in the United States. He announced sweeping tariffs, calling it Liberation Day. Trump claimed these tariffs would protect American jobs and punish unfair trade practices. The tariffs are significant. A baseline 10% tariff on all imports took effect on April 5th. This impacts nearly every good coming into the U.S. Targeted tariffs of up to 54% hit 60 countries. These countries have high trade deficits with the U.S. China, a frequent target of Trump's trade policies, faces the maximum 54% tariff. The auto industry faces a particularly heavy blow. A 25% tariff on all foreign-made cars took effect immediately. This affects popular brands from Japan, South Korea, and Germany. There are some exceptions to these sweeping tariffs. Canada and Mexico, partners in the USMCA trade agreement, are largely exempt. Specific products are also exempt. These include steel, aluminum, and some autos. Strategic sectors like copper, pharmaceuticals, and semiconductors also have exemptions. Finally, goods compliant with USMCA rules are exempt. The Trump administration claims these tariffs will correct unfair trade practices. They argue it will protect U.S. manufacturing and national security. However, critics suggest a different motive. They believe the tariffs are a way to raise revenue for promised tax cuts. The reaction to Trump's Liberation Day announcement was swift and severe. Global markets reeled as investors digested the news. The U.S. stock market took a nosedive. The S&P 500, NASDAQ, and Dow Jones all plunged by over 2%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ entered bear market territory. The U.S. dollar suffered significant losses. It hit a 10-year low against the Swiss franc. Against other major currencies, the dollar fell to a 3-year low. Since the start of 2025, the dollar has depreciated by 9%. This marks the steepest decline since the 2008 financial crisis. In contrast, the euro surged against the weakening dollar. It reached $1.15, reflecting growing concerns about the U.S. economy. Gold, a traditional safe haven asset, experienced a surge in demand. Its price jumped by nearly 3% to $3,430 per ounce. Analysts predict it could reach $3,500. Since April 7th, gold has gained 15% in value. The bond market also reacted, with U.S. Treasury yields showing a steepening curve. The yield on the 2-year Treasury note fell by 6 basis points, while the 30-year yield rose by 10 basis points. This indicates growing investor concern about the long-term impact of the tariffs on the U.S. economy. Oil prices, already under pressure from global economic concerns, declined further. Brent crude, the international benchmark, fell over 2% to $66.26 per barrel. While the Trump administration touts the potential benefits of Liberation Day tariffs, American households are bracing for the impact. Experts predict these tariffs will increase household costs by an average of $5,000 per year. This increase stems from higher prices on imported goods, from clothing and electronics to groceries and building materials. The cost of living is expected to rise by 6% as a result of the tariffs. This means American families will have to stretch their budgets further to afford basic necessities. The impact will be felt across the board, from housing and transportation to healthcare and education. For many families, the tariffs translate into difficult choices. Cutting back on discretionary spending, dipping into savings, or taking on additional debt may become necessary to cope with the increased cost of living. The tariffs' impact on inflation further compounds the challenges faced by American households. As prices rise, the purchasing power of wages erodes. This means families are effectively earning less, even if their incomes remain unchanged. The burden of these tariffs is particularly heavy on low- and middle-income households. These families typically spend a larger proportion of their income on goods and services impacted by the tariffs. Section 4. Industries in the crosshairs: autos, housing, and small businesses. The Liberation Day tariffs have sent shockwaves through several key industries, with potentially far-reaching consequences for the U.S. economy. The auto industry is among the hardest hit. The 25% tariff on foreign cars translates to price increases of $5,000 to $20,000 per vehicle. This will likely dampen demand for imported cars, potentially hurting dealerships and manufacturers. While the administration argues that these tariffs will boost domestic car manufacturing, the reality is more complex. The housing market, already grappling with affordability issues, faces further challenges. Tariffs on lumber, steel, and other building materials are expected to increase construction costs. This could lead to higher home prices, making it even more difficult for Americans to enter the housing market. Small businesses, the backbone of the U.S. economy, are also feeling the pinch. Many small businesses rely on imported goods and materials. The tariffs translate to higher costs for these businesses, squeezing their already tight margins. Section 5. A heavy burden tariffs disproportionately affect low-income workers. While the Liberation Day tariffs impact all Americans, low-income workers bear a disproportionate share of the burden. These workers often lack the savings or disposable income to absorb the increased cost of living. As prices for essential goods and services rise, low-income families are forced to make difficult choices. Cutting back on healthcare, nutritious food, or educational opportunities can have long-term consequences for these families. Moreover, job losses in industries affected by the tariffs, such as manufacturing and retail, are more likely to impact low-wage workers. The regressive nature of these tariffs exacerbates existing income inequality in the United States. While wealthier households may be able to absorb the increased costs, low-income families are pushed further into financial insecurity. This economic strain can have cascading effects leading to increased poverty, reduced social mobility, and greater reliance on social safety net programs. Section 6. Global backlash and economic fallout, a world on edge. President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs have sparked global backlash and economic fallout. Leaders from various countries condemn the tariffs, fearing impacts on global trade. The European Union threatened retaliatory tariffs on American goods. China vowed to protect its interests. The trade war raises concerns about a global recession. Economists warn of a potential global economic downturn. The IMF downgraded global growth forecasts. The Federal Reserve faces a difficult balancing act. Tariffs could force the Fed to raise interest rates. The tariffs have created economic uncertainty and volatility. Potential consequences include job losses and diminished living standards. The world watches the escalating trade war with bated breath.